I'm sitting here Friday afternoon before Shabbos, and it is right before, in 24 hours, is the beginning of the fast Tisha Bav, the 9th of the month of Av, remembering the destruction of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. And 11 years ago, exactly, same circumstances, it was Shabbos and then Tisha Bav was right after Shabbos. I had the zchus, I had the opportunity to be in Gush Kativ, to be with the families who lived in the different communities of Gush Kativ. 8,000 people, men, women, and children, who lived in different communities, who were facing expulsion right after Tisha B'Av, 11 years ago, in August of 2005. When Tisha Bav was going to conclude on Sunday night, all of that area was going to be a closed military zone and no one could come in. I was one of the lucky ones to be able to join the community for that Shabbos, for those last few days. And even those last few days, there was still that hope that maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu, maybe God would spare the people of Gush Kativ, that something would happen. The government would change his mind about throwing people out of their homes, destroying synagogues, destroying community centers, destroying the homes of people who lived in these communities for over 2 decades. These Jews were sent to these communities by different governments, labor governments, Likud governments. So I had the opportunity to be there during those last days. And let me tell you, I will never forget the power, how meaningful it was to me to watch a community approaching Tisha B'Av, a very sad period, knowing that they were faced with expulsion within hours after Tisha B'Av. They were going to have their destruction of their communities. I remember that weekend, that Friday, Erev Shabbos, I remember going to a graduation of kids from the different yeshivas of Gush Kativ. I was sitting in a room and all the kids were sitting there. It was wild, it was crazy, because what they were doing, the principal of the schools, were telling these young kids who were getting their diplomas on Friday, 48 hours before they were all going to be thrown out of their homes. They were giving the kids their diplomas. They were telling the children of different kitas, different classes, who their rebbes, who their teachers were going to be in the new school year. I'm sitting there, I'm saying, there's not going to be a new school year. There's not going to be a community. There are not going to be any schools. There are not going to be any homes. And here you have the principals of these schools telling these children, hundreds of children, telling them what class they're going to be in, who their teacher was going to be. And the kids were cheering when they heard who their teacher was going to be in the new year. And I'm sitting there in front of this huge audience of young people, teachers, rebbes, saying, I don't get this. What's going on over here? There's not going to be a next year. It was just beyond comprehension to watch this. During those days, we stayed in a dorm where, we're so used to air conditioning where we are in America and all over the world. During the summer, we have air conditioning in all of our rooms. We have central air conditioning, right? And I remember that they put us, the people from the community, put us into a dormitory room. It was 110, 115 degrees outside. And guess what we had in that room that we were so happy with? We had a little fan, not a big fan, a little fan to give us a little bit of air. And we felt so lucky to be there and watch, and really still having hope, some level of bitachon, of faith, that maybe something was going to happen where the people would not be thrown out of their homes. And, one of the sights that I will never forget was walking towards our dorm room on Friday, that Friday. And there was an elderly man with a long white beard. I see him right now. I see him. I close my eyes. I see this elderly man. You know what he was doing? He was putting bricks. He was building something on Friday before Tisha Bav, 48 hours before the Jews were being expelled. 10,000 soldiers were all over the area preparing for after Tisha B'Av, when they were going to come in and force every single family out of their homes. And I'm watching this elderly man trying to figure out, what is he doing? Why is he doing this? They're going to be destroying everything. And they did, of course, destroy everything. Why is this man still building something 48 hours before? And I think I got it. Because this man, as an individual, was still hoping that Hashem, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, was going to save these communities. He was still hoping that even at the last moment, something was going to happen. It was an extraordinary thing to watch. That Shabbos was one of the most unbelievable Shabbosim that I've ever had in my life. Because I'm looking at people, I'm not from that area. I'm going back to New York eventually. And I'm looking at these people, the Shabbos that is approaching, which in my heart I knew was going to be the last Shabbos. The last Shabbos. After 20, 25 years of people living in these communities, they were not going to be there anymore in 48 hours. And that Shabbos, when we went to shul to daven, with hundreds of people and young people who were learning in this community of Nevei Dakalim. And when we came to the Chododi, the singing part of the prayer, it went on for 1.5 hours. They were dancing and singing for 1.5 hours. What takes normally 10 minutes to finish, 1.5 hours. And I am looking at this again saying, these people are celebrating Shabbos, happy, dancing, singing, like I've never seen in my entire life. An hour and a half of singing and dancing, when in their hearts they know that the end is near. That very, very soon they will be forced out of their homes and out of their schools and out of their base medrash and so on. And they're singing and dancing, and I'm looking at this. I remember that Friday night eating with the yeshiva boys, learning in this community. I remember sitting at the table, this is 11 years ago in 2005. I remember the moments as if it was right now. I remember the chicken on the table. I remember counting the number of pieces of chicken for the main and saying, you know, there's not going to be enough for everybody. And I noticed that these young people were not taking any chicken. They were waiting for me and 2 or 3 of my friends who were with me in Gush Katif, that final Shabbos. They were waiting for me to take my portion before they took their portion. I will never forget it. I will never forget the appreciation of having a piece of challah. There wasn't that much. But the happiness, the singing, the celebration, the power that was there in spite of being faced with tragedy. Anyone listening to this, imagine the community that you live in, that the government says unilateral withdrawal. We forgot already that there was no deal with our enemies. There was no deal that we're going to give up land and there's going to be peace and things will be better. We're just getting out. And all the Jews who live there are going to be removed. This beautiful synagogues in all of these communities. It was all coming to an end. That Friday night, and let me tell you, the next day, Shabbos, someone had paid for a kiddush after davening. It was 110 degrees, 115 degrees outside. They had these nets so that people would not be facing the sun. And let me tell you something. A kiddush, the kind of kiddush I never saw in my entire life. The food that was there for people, the celebration of Shabbos and the happiness. Now we're talking about Shabbos. It is 6-7 hours before the beginning of Tisha Bav, right after Shabbos. And the celebration And by the way, when you walk through the community, you could see at certain houses there were trucks, moving vans to move people out of their homes. Just a few. Most people were still hoping against hope that something was going to happen, that their own government would not throw them out of their homes. The Prime Minister Sharon at that time, who was responsible for building these communities, that there would be a change and they would be able to continue to live in these communities. What a Shabbos it was. I'm giving you just a touch. The people of this community, they love Torah. They love the land of Israel. They love the Jewish people. The difficulty of a family of mothers and fathers, of children, neighbors that you have for so many years, that all of this, in my head, I was thinking, all of this is coming to an end. Why are people celebrating? Why are people happy? Why are they having this magnificent Shabbos when the end is coming closer and closer, where communities are going to be destroyed, entire communities? Every house was bulldozed. The synagogues were destroyed. The community centers destroyed. Everything destroyed. We have Tisha Bav to remember the destruction, to remember why there was destruction, because of needless hatred, because people being jealous and people trying to hurt each other. And I am with the most amazing group of people imaginable. This Tisha Bav was one of the most magnificent, meaningful Tisha Bavs that I've ever had in my life, because I knew the destruction that was coming very, very soon. And I remember that night in this huge shul, there were 1,000 people there in the Neve Dakalim. I remember when Eicha was concluded, I was standing in the back of the shul. There was nowhere to move. You couldn't fall down because people were so much on top of each other. And I remember when we finished saying Eicha, and I remember now it's Tisha Bav. Now we are 24 hours away from these communities being eradicated, being destroyed by their own government. That the lives of these people, these magnificent people, was going to be turned upside down. The upheaval that was created in these families. Can you imagine your children who have neighbors and friends? They weren't going to have those neighbors anymore. They weren't going to have those friends anymore. People who daven, prayed together, learned together, studied together, lived together. That all of this was going to end and everyone was going to be dispersed. But that Eicha, that night of Tisha Bav, oh my God. It was the most magnificent, meaningful experience I've ever had. When they finished saying Eicha, from the front of the shul, they started singing Sheyabana Beis Hamikdash. Sheyabana Beis Hamikdash. And 1,000 people joined in. I thought the heavens were going to open up. The power that was in that shul. Everyone Sheyabana Beis Hamikdash. And as we left the shul, we saw young people, yeshiva boys with their tzitzis hanging out, sitting on the floor by the hundreds outside of the synagogue. The tears that were flowing from their eyes. There were tears. There was water, literally, as you walked out. These young people of 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 and on, crying like babies. Crying for the Beis Hamikdash, the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. And I think crying, realizing that they were going to have their own destruction, that their lives were going to be destroyed in terms of what life was like for them. There was not going to be a new school year. You weren't going to have your neighbors. You weren't going to live in the communities that you got used to, where your best friends were your relatives. Parents talking to their children, explaining to their children, why is this being done? Why are we being thrown out of our homes? The tears on the floor. The crying that I saw, that I have never seen in my entire life. ever was so powerful. I actually thought to myself, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was going to listen, because these kind of tears will have an effect in Shemayim. These tears will have an effect. And I remember the next day, oh man, it was hot. And we walked throughout the community. And again, watching people, looking at families, people that I knew, people that I had become friendly with. Because I used to go to Gush Kativ on such a regular basis in those years to give chizuk to the people. These were our people in pain. These were people who were suffering the pain of facing destruction of their homes and their communities. To give them chizuk and to hope that maybe something good was going to happen. And I'll never forget what a father said to me from one of those communities that Friday. He said to me, we were outside his home. His daughter had been murdered by terrorists right outside the home years before. And the father looked at me and the people that I was with and said to me, take a look over there. You see that over there? And there was a smokestack. You could see smoke coming up. He said, that is Beersheba. That's Beersheba over there. He said, if they throw us out of our homes here, guess what they're going to do? They will be setting up missile launchers to shoot missiles into Israel. And isn't that exactly what happened? That these communities were turned into facilities to be able to direct missiles towards Eretz Yisrael, towards different communities, from Beersheba to so many of the other places in the south. What a Tisha Bav that was. What a powerful, powerful Tisha Bav that was. Destruction in our own time. Not a long time ago, in our own time. What magnificent Jews of such tremendous faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who were proud to live in these communities, in spite of missiles that would fall every now and then. I had that experience many times, but they were proud to live there. And we see the result of giving up land, where the end result is that our enemies are brought closer and it becomes more dangerous. So, it's Tisha Bav. We need to take things to heart in terms of what Tisha Bav means. How many people can internalize what happened during the period of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash? How many people can internalize that it means something in August of 2016? But that's what we need to do. We need to internalize and we need to learn. That is the whole purpose. We need to be strong. We need to have faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We need to be there for each other. We need to not undermine each other. We need not be jealous of anyone else. We need not to feel the kind of sinat chinam that results in destruction not thousands of years ago, but results in destruction in our own time. We need to be there for each other. That's what Tisha Bav has to be. The destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, the destruction of communities in Eretz Yisrael, resulting in more death and destruction for our people. We need to learn the lessons, but most important, we need to love each other, or at the very least, like each other. Whether we agree with every single issue or not is irrelevant. We need to treat each other the way I believe HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the way I believe God treats us, the way He looks at us. We need to be less judgmental. We need to be less concerned about, protecting HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem wants us to deal with the Bein Adam Li Adam to treat each other in the proper fashion, to be there for each other, especially when we disagree with our fellow Jew. Even more, it's easy to like someone that you like anyway, that is your friend and buddy. But how about the person who's different from you? Can you find place in your heart to love that person because that is a fellow Jew and that's what Hashem wants? That's what Tisha Bav is. That's what it's all about. It's not just about the destruction of the temple a long time ago. What does it mean for right now? No lessons? There needs to be lessons, important lessons. And we need to be there for each other. On whatever level you're capable of being there for a fellow Jew, whether it's your neighbor, whether it's a fellow Jew thousands of miles away or hundreds of miles away. When one person is in pain, we need to feel the pain of another Jew and do something about it. When the Jews of Gush Kativ were going through the pain that they were going through, unfortunately, most people were just not interested. That's not what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. It's not about whether we could save the world or not, or we could have saved Gush Kativ. It is, did we do whatever we could do for fellow Jews? That is the issue. That's what Tisha Bav is, and we should take it to heart.